I tried to think of a better way to start the show, but Dan Lanning's got me thinking about a Miley Cyrus song.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you all so much for helping make that the case, especially my everydayers. How concerned should we be with the offense? We'll go through the things that were not as good. Kyler Kasper's in the portal. I don't think that has a big impact on the Ducks. Everybody else likely agrees, not just because he's been hurt and unfortunately out for the season. And some thoughts on Brandon Finney and Indiana on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Before tip-off, check the FanDuel app, see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. I tried to come up with something else, but it was too perfect. We all remember the Miley Cyrus song, The Climb. That's what Dan Lanning has been doing. He just keeps climbing. He just keeps leveling up. Every single season has had at least as many, and until this point, we'll see what happens against Indiana, more wins than the year before. 10 wins, 12 wins, 13 wins, and a conference championship after appearing in the conference championship game the year before. Now he came into a game in the same position, bracket-wise, as he was last year, and now Oregon is one of the Final Four teams in all of college football. Just keeps on leveling up. And yet I'm sitting here asking myself, can he do it again? Is he going to do it again this year? It doesn't feel like an if he's going to do it again. It's when. Is that time now? That depends on a lot of different factors that happen next Friday at the Peach Bowl. Because Indiana, as I think we all saw in the Rose Bowl against Alabama, darn good football team. Cignetti's incredible, man. Not only is Cignetti the only coach to win off of a bye, but he did it by 35 points. I mean, the dude just wins. That infamous phrase, Google me, just keeps on popping up. And frankly, he's done it in a shorter amount of time than Lanning, but there are a lot of similarities to what's on the line in this particular game. Because Indiana this year, I talked about this over on Locked On College Football with Jacob Goins of Locked On Hoosiers, who you will be hearing from plenty on the show in this upcoming week. Indiana this year has just kept leveling up. Winning against Illinois was a really good win because they blew them out. Was not close. And then when they went on the road and beat Oregon, that was the biggest win in program history. Winning the Big Ten championship against Ohio State, no less, who is 12-0. That was the biggest win in program history. And then on a national stage, they embarrass Alabama. Everyone just keeps climbing. And Dan Lanning's has been a little bit slower, but it has not exactly been slow by typical college football standards. So Lanning's opportunity against Indiana is to win the biggest game of his career. I mean, he's an underdog in a big game. I'm sure there are plenty of you out there that would actually feel really good about that. But what Dan Lanning has built over the last several years in Eugene, I don't think came to a culmination on Thursday with a shutout of Texas Tech. It's the first time since 1917, I think that's the year the United States entered World War I. It was during the Woodrow Wilson administration. I mean, been a while since Oregon shut out a team in a bowl game. That was the best defensive performance Oregon has had in a big game in my entire life. And probably in its entire history. It just keeps climbing. And no, I'm not going to sing any of the lyrics. You will never in a million years hear me sing on this particular show. It will never, not for a single lyric. I can talk, I cannot sing one note. Never learned, never good at it, not for me. So, I'm sparing you all of that. But that was a pretty emphatic statement win against Texas Tech. The Red Raiders, yeah, they had the curse of having that first round bye, and I don't think that's going to continue in college football because bye teams are 1-7. 1-7. And it's one of the reasons I said all year, and Lanning kind of admitted as much after the game. Yeah, well, look how it's working out for us, and it's pretty hard, and the college football calendar's messed up. And he stood by what he said before the game, on which he was correct, that this game should have been played in Lubbock, Texas. I hope that we get there. Because what you don't want to see going forward is teams potentially losing games on purpose by resting starters so that they don't play in a conference championship game, so that they don't have a bye and a super long layoff. Of course, Curt Cignetti doesn't really care about any of that. But Lanning has just continued to take the next step. And I talked about on that last bonus show I did before the game with Mike about how the pressure was on Dan Lanning because he's in year 4 and Oregon was not the new kid on the block, and Texas Tech is, in the national college football landscape, newer to having a seat at the table. And if you lost in the same position, playoff-wise, 2 years in a row, that sort of thing can hang like a dark cloud over the pro. No worries. Sunny skies, all good. Now the question just becomes, does he have another statement in him this year? Because if you beat Indiana and Curt Cignetti, they are the undisputed number 1 team in all of college football right now. They are an incredibly complete, well-coached team across the board. They did have an injury to one of their defensive linemen going into the Alabama game, which stunk. Stephen Daly got hurt celebrating the Big Ten championship, high-fiving fans. Absolutely sucks for that kid. And you never would have known it if you turned on the Rose Bowl at literally any point in time. So Curt Cignetti's going to be getting a lot of praise and attention, as he should. Because frankly, even though Oregon just blanked Texas Tech, Indiana was more dominant against Alabama. Now, I think Texas Tech's a better football team than Indiana. Or excuse me, than Alabama. They're a far more complete football team. Both are talented, but I've watched both teams all year. Alabama, after they beat Oklahoma, my number 1 takeaway I locked on college football. Yeah, neither one of these teams is going to go win the national championship or beat Indiana. And lo and behold, here we are. So I think that what Indiana has done to this point, Dan Lanning's got a chance to make another big statement. That was one level of sending a message to the locker room, Oregon fans, the rest of the college football world. Hey, we're here. We're not messing around. And that continued growth is very real. But if he goes and beats Indiana and Curt Cignetti, Cignetti has only ever lost at Indiana to teams who played for the national championship last year. That's it. Ohio State, that won it all a season ago, and Notre Dame. Those are the losses. That's it. And frankly, I don't know, college football is wild, and I cannot believe the other semifinal is Ole Miss and Miami, but here we are. I think the winner of Oregon-Indiana is going to go on to win the national championship. Play the games on the field, not as talking heads see it, not as paper sees, not as stats, nothing like that. But with all the buzz, which is absolutely warranted, against Indiana, who's a favorite in this game, if Dan Lanning wins it, boy, that stock that's already as high as any coach in college football not named Curt Cignetti would shoot up once again. So let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, however you want to get in touch. Become a Locked On Ducks insider. Lots of ways. I try to make it easy. So, how concerned should we be with Oregon's offense? First, this episode brought to you by Rugy at Ready. Let's talk about something most men don't bring up, but absolutely should. Stress from work, money, life. It doesn't just switch off at night. And when it shows up at the worst possible time, Rugy at Ready is designed to help you take back control. Rugy at Ready is a next-generation prescription treatment created to support both the brain and the body, so you can feel present, confident, and ready when the moment matters. Rugy at Ready combines 3 clinically proven ingredients in 1 mint that dissolves under your tongue so it absorbs fast. You connect with a board-certified doctor online, and everything ships discreetly to your door. It's easy to understand why over 150,000 men have already made the switch. If you've been thinking about taking that next step, now is the time. Head to rugiet.com/lockedoncollege. That's rugiet.com/lockedoncollege. All caps, all one word, to get 15% off your order for a limited time. So you have to act now. That's rugiet.com/lockedoncollege. rugiet.com/lockedoncollege. Rugiet ready. Feel present, feel confident, feel ready. Recording this show in the morning, so a little coffee for the second segment sip. Let's talk about the offense. I wanted to keep things all positive yesterday on the show because it was a positive occasion. Oregon wins, defense dominates, special teams almost perfect aside from a late Sappington field goal. But the offense, If one of you had sent me an SSA on what's your concern for the offense going into the Indiana game, with 10 being I am panicked that Oregon might not score a point and 1 being they're going to score 40, I'd probably put it at a 7. I'd put it at a 7. So there were a lot of things that were not as good. I want to go through a couple of moments and share thoughts because I know many of you have them, because how could you not after that particular game? But the two things that were the worst things that Oregon did in that game, or didn't do, really. A lot of it was, I shouldn't say a lot, a solid chunk of it was self-inflicted wounds. A good amount of it was Texas Tech's defense being really good. Now, the concern is the offense scored 1 touchdown against Indiana. The offense scored 2 touchdowns against Washington, who's got a good defense, but not as good as the other ones. And the offense scored, 2 touchdowns, but, we all watched it. Well, I guess, 2 touchdowns? Yeah. Against Texas Tech. 23 points. I thought they'd get 24. I just thought it would look a little bit cleaner than that, is all I'm saying. But worst thing that Oregon failed to do in the game was run the football. And what I am hoping happens here to the Oregon offensive line is what happened to the Oregon defense. I think that what took place in the JMU game in the second half is something Tosh Lepoy described as the best thing that could have happened to the defense. Well, between not winning the Joe Moore Award and then for large stretches of the game, adjustments were made and improvements were had. For large stretches of the game, the Texas Tech defensive line was manhandling Oregon. And in the run game, they manhandled them the entire game. In pass protection, they got better from the first quarter as Texas Tech wore down a little bit. So the inability to run the football, I don't think that can be sustained against Indiana. The offense cannot play the way it did. Poncho had 2 bad snaps. Dante Moore fumbled in exchange. There were a number of those sorts of mistakes that can't show up again. And I don't think they will. Poncho hasn't had snapping problems all year. I wonder how much of that was, if you want to call it jitters or, trying to... It honestly felt to me at times like they were trying to just get past where they were a year ago, which was this spot, and move on from Ohio State. That's what those mistakes say to me. Maybe it was just one of those things that happens and then we never see it again. I don't know. But a couple other things that the offense did not do well. Will Stein called an infuriating game in the first half. Absolutely, positively frustrating. And the most frustrating part was that Oregon wasn't able to run the ball, and Texas Tech was doing a great job defending the RPOs. And Will Stein kept going back in certain spots, especially third and short, to the tempo RPO. Oregon is not actually a tempo team. I'm sure there are folks on the East Coast that think that because they still have visions of Chip Kelly calling the plays and scoring touchdowns in under 2 minutes every time, and DeAnthony Thomas and Michael James and Kenyon Barner running all over the field. This Oregon football team is not actually a tempo offense, and that's fine. I don't have a preference as to whether you do that or not. I just like you to be productive. And the RPOs, just little quick hitters on the perimeter, the tags, they call them, to the run game, have been a part of Oregon's offense all season long. I have no problem with them continuing to do what's worked. Once Texas Tech demonstrated a clear ability to take those away, they needed to go away, and they didn't. And they didn't in key spots. That's what was so unbelievably annoying and frustrating to watch in that first half. Is he kept trying the same thing over and over and over. And maybe Dante Moore is checking into those plays, and it's not a Will Stein issue. I'm sure plenty of Oregon fans want to dunk on Will Stein today. I think he deserves a solid amount of criticism after that game, and he's got to be way better against Indiana, or Bryant Haynes will again run circles around this Oregon offense. That is absolutely true. But the best sequence that really summarized why the first half I thought was poor from not necessarily a game planning standpoint, because they came out on the first drive and Oregon went down the field and Harkey got beat. Dante Moore could have stepped up in the pocket. I think Harkey kind of blocked, thinking that he was going to do that, and if he had, there was lane to run on the moves to the right. And by the way, just as a general note, I'll dive into this more next week, I'm sure. Dante Moore needs to run less. Or at least that shouldn't be as big a part of the game plan as it was on Thursday. But the initial drive game plan was certainly good enough to go down and score a touchdown. I mean, Dante Moore makes a better throw to Malik Benson, just puts it out there a little bit more, and Oregon has an opening drive touchdown. And the game would have felt very, very different. But the best representation of where I thought Will Stein faltered in the first half was Oregon's marching down. I think this was after the fake punt. And they hit that long fade route to Malik Benson, who makes an incredible catch. I mean, the month of Malik continues. It's been more than a month at this point. Dude's been a stud. So he makes that acrobatic catch on the sideline. And then Oregon has first and goal. And after, for a quarter and a half at that point, tempo RPOs were not working. Will Stein dials it up on first and goal. And it almost results in a pick six. Now, in both Dante Moore and Will Stein's slight defense, again, I still didn't like that they did that. And I'll explain why in just a moment. In slight defense, when you go back and watch a number of the ones that got blown up, Oregon's perimeter blocking by the wide receivers, straight up awful. Dante Moore didn't throw the ball outside when he didn't read a 3-on-2 numbers advantage, which is an automatic in his head for really any offense that he should throw it out there. But Oregon's receivers are tied at whoever was on the perimeter. They, for whatever reason, they've been great at this all season. They could not block Texas Tech's corners or safeties who got downhill and made plays in the backfield. Now, even if you see the numbers out there, you've just got to make an adjustment. So they make that explosive play, and you're thinking, finally, Oregon's going to go down, and they're going to get a touchdown and make it a two-possession game and open things up. And they go tempo, and you're like, well, that hasn't worked all day. Why did you think it would work here? So they catch a break, frankly, that it's an incomplete pass. Then on second and goal, they huddle, they call a play, they commit to an actual run, and Jordan Davison gets down to the 2-yard line. I think he picked up 7 or 8 yards. One of their best runs of the day. Then your third and goal at 2, and you go right back to what hasn't been working the entire first half. And what do you know? Texas Tech blows it up. And then you go for it, fourth and goal from the 2, and you call an 8-man protection, 2-man route, sprint right, which was particularly frustrating because it called me back to those dreaded 2023 Washington games where in Seattle, Oregon tried that right before the half and it did not work. Like that particular play is designed to beat cover 0. And if Texas Tech had come out and cover 0, no safety help over the top, straight man-to-man across the board with extra pressure, that would have been a pretty good play call. I think Gary Bryant can beat any of those Texas Tech DBs on a sprint out there. But if you watch what Malik Benson is doing on the play, who Dante Moore tried to throw the ball to, and then David Bailey leapt in the air because he's one of the most freakish athletes I've ever seen Oregon play against. He leaps up in the air and swats it down. Malik Benson is actually just trying to free up Gary Bryant, kind of run a little bit of a pick play there. But the play design is to sprint the pocket, and it's an 8-man protection and a 2-man route that's really designed to go to one guy. And if Texas Tech was running any type of zone, which they were, the play is taken away. So right before the half in 2023 against Washington, Oregon tried a very similar play, and the same thing happened. And Joel Klatt, going into the Pac-12 title game, asked Will Stein about it. And Will Stein said, yeah, I've learned my lesson from that. I got to let Bo Nix sit. Like, sprint outs are typically something that you run in a short yardage situation for a young quarterback because you're trying to reduce the field and simplify his read. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. And that was a pretty simple one-read play. And with how Dante Moore had played in the first half, I don't understand why you don't trust him to sit in the pocket and make a couple of different reads. And that was the question that Klatt asked Will Stein going into the Pac-12 title game. When Oregon went for it on 4th and goal again, they scored a touchdown. How? They let Bo Nix actually sit in the pocket, dissect the defense, which he was really good at, and have multiple options. So I didn't hate the decision necessarily to go for it there. But I hate, of the 4 plays they ran, goal to go in that spot, 3 of them did not make any sense. And the one where it did make sense and they didn't try to just catch Texas Tech napping, which they clearly were not doing, wound up being a 7-yard gain. So hopefully those adjustments get made. Again, Oregon got away with it against Texas Tech. You're not going to do that against Indiana. They're a much better football team. Much better football team. So that was a particularly frustrating first half of football to watch on the offensive end. And yet, it wasn't everything that Oregon did wrong. I still have more thoughts to get to. I knew I was going to go long on that. I knew I was going to go longer than I thought. Anyway, this will be a very, very full show today because I have more thoughts on the offense that we saw. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night, before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour, which does indeed include tonight as this show airs on Friday, January 2nd. Happy New Year, everybody. And are you curious about the line? It opened at 4.5. It fell down to 3.5. Let's do a live check as I do this particular live read here. Oregon is a 3.5-point underdog. 3.5-point underdog. Do you think Dan Lanning will put that in Ducks versus them? I don't know. We're just going to have to wait and find out. We will get the opportunity to, but Oregon an underdog against Indiana. The first time around, they were a 7.5-point favorite. Now they're a 3.5-point underdog. My, how times have changed, and Indiana is indeed that good. If you think Oregon is going to win, plus 3.5 is probably the way to go. If you think Indiana is going to do it again, minus 3.5, probably the way to go. Before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. I do want to throw out there just in case, although Dante's body language and the way he read the play really doesn't seem to indicate that it could be the case. Maybe somebody did something wrong on that play. Maybe the execution wasn't perfect. Maybe a tight end was supposed to leak out and didn't, but both tight ends stayed in to block on a sprint out, and so did the running back, I believe it was Davison. Speaking of which, the 4th and 1 Wildcat early in the game, I know plenty of folks didn't like that play called. It felt telegraphed. That formation's been really good for Oregon all season long. I didn't have a huge objection to the decision. Dante Moore had been cruising, and plenty of folks were sending me messages wondering, why do you take the ball out of Dante's hands? Well, we know Dante Moore's not a great runner, and if you want to throw it on 4th and 1, okay. But then if you don't get it on 4th and 1, then people just ask, well, why aren't you running the ball on 4th and 1? Because because you really couldn't. So I didn't think that was that bad. The 3-and-out after the interception, that was not good, and that stemmed from, again, an inability to run the ball, and getting behind the sticks a lot was a big problem in this game. Like, Oregon did not win first down in a huge way, and eventually, I think in the second half, even if it was just 2 or 3 yards, they stayed ahead of the sticks, and 2nd and 7 is a lot better than 2nd and 12. But after Brandon Finney's interception, man, to go 3-and-out right there was pretty brutal, pretty brutal in that particular spot. But in many ways, as I've laid out, I don't think Will Stein had his best game. Found a way, got it done. Some things have to be better. However, this in no way was entirely on Will Stein. It was on Dante Moore as well. So on the 4th and 2 late in the third quarter, Oregon's going for it on the plus side of the 50, up 13-0, trying to go down, make it a 20-0 game, and put the final nail in the coffin. I think you could have punted that ball. I don't have a huge objection to going for it, but Will Stein dials up mesh rail, which is a very common play call in college football in that sort of spot because it's very hard to defend. And Dante Moore doesn't make the right read. He had Malik Benson for a moment. He definitely had Jeremiah McLaughlin for the first down. He tried to fit it into Jamari Johnson, and Ben Roberts, their linebacker, makes a great play. Tip your cap, didn't make the right read. The worst, and these are the sorts of things that happened against Indiana and that give me pause going into the next game against the Hoosiers, because there were plenty of these moments. The worst thing that Dante Moore did was actually one of Will Stein's best play calls of the day. Oregon's going for it, 4th and 2. Don't remember exactly what quarter it was, but they go jumbo package. And he called the same play that he called on 3rd and 1 at Iowa, that again was a touchdown to Roger Saliapaga, but Dave Iuli got beat. Dante Moore stepped on his foot, tripped, and Oregon had to settle for a field goal. They called the same play, this time to Sadiq. And this play, I'm sure you all know the one that I'm talking about, because who's calling the game with Joe Tessitore? Greg McElroy? No, I don't think it was Greg McElroy. I'm not remembering that off the top of my head right now. He pointed it out immediately. It's technically a 2-man route. It's really a 1-man route. You're trying to get everybody to bite on the fact that you got heavy personnel and you're going to run the ball in a short yardage spot. Kenyon Sadiq is running down the field wide open, and Dante Moore doesn't throw it. I can't tell you why. I don't know if somebody asked him about it after the game, and I just didn't see the quote. I cannot fathom why Dante Moore didn't throw the ball. But those are the sorts of mistakes that were self-inflicted wounds, in addition to a couple of bad snaps, a muffed exchange, a penalty here, there. But Texas Tech did a lot to slow down Oregon in the game. I figured they would. But that particular play, maybe I'm reading too much into one particular moment, but that's concerning for a couple reasons. Number one, why can you not see that Kenyon Sadiq is running behind the defense? Number two, it's 4th and 2. Even if Kenyon Sadiq is double covered, give him a chance to make a play. You could draw a flag. If they intercept it, it's a punt. There was no downside to throwing that ball down the field regardless of the coverage. And that's one where Dante Moore has to be smarter. That sort of situational football, again, didn't wind up costing Oregon against Tech. It will cost you against Indiana. It absolutely will. That was honestly, I think, the most frustrating play of the day. There were frustrating moments and trends from Will Stein, but that singular play, because the game was still in doubt at that point in time, had me ripping what little hair out I keep on my head. Because and then he tried to run for the first down and didn't get it. And Dante Moore's not an elite runner. We saw that again in this game. Capable, but not elite. So I don't know. It's designed to go to Sadiq. It was there. It's 4th down. Everything about that play said throw it almost no matter what. And it was wide open, and it should have been a walk-in touchdown. So Oregon won the game 23-0. They could have won by a lot more. But if these sorts of details, smart situational play calling, proper execution, cleaning up the mistakes, if you don't clean those up against Indiana, then Oregon's season will come to a close on Friday night. So wrap with a couple of SSAs here. Brandon Finney is the best recruiting win for Oregon of the last decade. Decade? Ooh. Well, he was just the defensive MVP, responsible in some form or fashion for 3 turnovers. Got to credit Bryce Betcher for forcing the fumble, but he recovered it. Johnny on the spot. I think he's an underrated tackler. He forced that fumble earlier this year against Iowa, and then the 2 picks, just incredible stuff. By the way, I mentioned on the reaction show that it was zone coverage, and Baron Morton just didn't see him. I don't know if it was a match concept or a double team or what. It did actually look like Oregon was in man-to-man, and they were just bracketing Virgil, number 1, Texas Tech's wide receiver, and Kennedy and Finney just hovered around him, and then Finney just dropped off. So I don't know if that was a bracket or if it's a zone match or what, but I just wanted to note that because I went back and watched the play again. But the best recruiting win of the last decade, I mean, he's up there. The guy, where would Oregon's defense be right now without him? They've probably given up, a touchdown at least in that particular game. Josh Connerly's got to be really high on that list. The career that he ended up having and how integral he was to Oregon's Big Ten championship season and the Big Ten championship game. I mean, dude took Abdul Carter out of the Big Ten title game. Can't overlook that. The last decade. So we're talking the 2025 to 2016 classes would be 10 classes in a row. Pretty sure Justin Herbert was a 2016 recruit. Pretty sure. I'm going to double check that real quick. Yeah, because 2016, I think he would have been a true freshman. He was, man, it's crazy how under-recruited Justin Herbert was coming out of high school. Yeah, Herbert class of 2016. Look, that wasn't as competitive of a battle for sure. Like, Finney's one of the biggest high-profile ones. Kayvon Thibodeau's got to be on that list, too. So, SSA and Finney being the biggest win, I can make the argument for a lot of different guys. It's still early. I know the entire career of Justin Herbert and what he did for Oregon football, and Kayvon Thibodeau as well. I think I got to put that at a 4, as crazy as it sounds. Thibodeau was the best defensive player Oregon had, and the defense significantly changed when he wasn't on the field. And defense would be worse if Finney wasn't out there. There are times where, because this Oregon defense is so talented, he's not the best defender on the field. He's always one of them. But there was no question Kayvon Thibodeau was head and shoulders above just about every other guy on that Oregon defense for a couple of years. So I got to put that one at 4. I get where your head's at. I think it's a little prisoner of the moment, which is a great moment to be the prisoner of, because guess what? Oregon just won the Orange Bowl 23-0 and is 2 wins away. Speaking of which, here's another one to wrap today's show. SSA on a confidence level against Indiana. So I was going to make this lower on Spencer's scale of agreement. Oregon won the Rose Bowl, first ever playoff game in the history of the sport, by 39 points. And then Ohio State won the game by 22. So things can flip around. I think this Indiana team is better than that Oregon team was. But confidence against Indiana, man. Can Oregon win the game? Yes. I have been, not literally, of course, singing from the high heavens that Indiana did not dominate Oregon. They did not. They beat Oregon. They were better than Oregon. But this whole, Indiana dominated them. Well, then why does Vegas have the line set, according to our friends at FanDuel, at Oregon or at Indiana minus 3.5? If it was so dominant, shouldn't it be 8.5, 9.5? We've seen them set those lines in the playoffs so far. So confidence level, Indiana is so good. They do so many things well, and Oregon's got to change a number of things from its last matchup. As I sit here and record this show on Friday morning, I'm I'm going to give that a 4 again. 5 would be, I think it's a coin flip, go either way. Indiana's a slight favorite. I think they should be. And do I believe Oregon's capable of winning? Yes. If you ask me right now, I'd pick Indiana to win the game. Cignetti is just incredible. Absolutely incredible. And Dan Lanning, also really good. But Indiana's playing better football right now. So, not that Oregon's playing bad football. Obviously not. But which offense looks better? The answer is Indiana. But, they struggle with Ohio State. And Alabama's defense not as good as Ohio State's. I think Oregon is closer to the Buckeyes than they are Alabama defensively. But, yeah, so a couple of 4s on the SSA to wrap today's show. Appreciate everyone listening. Thanks for being patient as well. See you next time. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And go Ducks.